it was really curious to see how the 2023 Denver Broncos were going to do to follow up their disastrous first season of 2022 with Russell Wilson. To put it into context, Russell Wilson was signed and traded from the Seattle Seahawks to the Denver Broncos in the 2022 offseason 2 years ago. And then, well, let's just say that his first season as a Denver Bronco didn't exactly go the way that many people had hoped for. And especially with a head coach that wasn't know what he was doing with Nathaniel Hackett. So to try and further prevent Russell Wilson from getting roasted by Patrick Starr, yes, Patrick Starr from SpongeBob SquarePants even further, the team followed up their Christmas Day firing of Nathaniel Hackett with the hiring of former Saints head coach Sean Payton. But this also required a trade. A trade of two second-round picks. Now, I was kind of weary of the hire and trade for Payne, considering he hadn't coached in a few years, but he at least brought a better offensive background than Hackett, and he could also help Wilson in a bounce-back season. So, for the Denver Broncos going into 2023, expectations were kind of high for Russell Wilson to bounce back, for Sean Payton to help Wilson in his bounce back, and just for Denver overall to rebound from a horrible, very horrible 2022. Unfortunately, didn't get off that way. Pretty much more of the same, because they started off 0-3. They started off 0-3 to start the year. They actually started off their first two games a combined 3 points at home in the first two games against the Raiders and the Commanders. And against the Commanders, they blew a 21-3 halftime advantage. Like, how the hell do you do that? So anyway, this was all against in a prelude to what was to come in Miami in their first road game of the season. A 50-point ass whooping. A historical 50-point ass beating, where the Denver defense let the Dolphins score on every chance they could. Even from their backups, even from the Miami backups scored on the Denver starting defense. That's embarrassing. That's a fireable offense. And I was very surprised that nobody on that team got fired in that game. And I get it was early on in the season, but 50 points? 50 points in a game? Did you try? Did you try in that game? Now, sure, Russell Wilson had his fair share of mistakes, but he wasn't even that much of a detriment in half of Denver's poor start at 0-3 and eventually at 1-5, when his defense and even most of his offensive supporting cast couldn't even help him out. Was Sean Payton helping him out? I don't think so. So let's talk about that supporting cast. Half of that supporting cast was non-existent, and especially when you look at Jerry Jeudy. So the rushing committee of Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Samaje Perine, they were serviceable, but not reliable enough to balance out the passing attack. And then when you look at the receiving game, outside of Cortland Sutton, there was no help for Wilson to go to. And yes, that includes, like I said, Jerry Jeudy. Because when you look at Jerry Jeudy, he's had his flashes. He looked really good a couple years back. But then, man, he has really disappointed in the last 2 years, in 2022 and 2023. And especially in a season where both he and Denver really needed each other, nowhere to be found. Especially in a year where most people had considered trading for him. Now, he has no value. And then when you look at later in the season, when the Broncos were winning all these games, they still managed to bench Russell Wilson. I mean, maybe Russell Wilson was one half of the catalyst of what ended up happening to Denver. He still played better than last season. He made smarter decisions with the ball. But again, despite all that, he still ended up getting benched in the final two games for Jarrett Stidham, the final two games of the season. Like, at the time, it's an odd decision by Sean Payton and the Broncos higher ups, but just like, that's kind of brutal. It's a brutal business, but it's like, shit, man. It's like for all Russell Wilson has done, like, yeah, it was good, but again, not good enough. But it's just like, well, that's shitty. So looking at some of the positives for Denver's season, I mean, it's that 5-game winning streak that gave their season life. Like I said, Russell Wilson was one half of that catalyst for Denver's mid-season turnaround. But it was also because of their defense as well. But nonetheless, they started off 1-5, but then they really turned it around. They won 5 straight, and it wasn't a fluky 5-game winning streak. They beat the likes of the Packers, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Browns, and they were looking at one point like a sneaky playoff contender. And I was delusional enough to believe that they had an outside shot to steal away the AFC West from the Chiefs, who were struggling during that point of the season. Like, there was an outside shot of that actually happening. There was one point in the season where Denver was just 1 game back of the Chiefs, and yes, I was crazy enough to believe that they could actually steal away the division if they could hold it together. But unfortunately, they couldn't hold it together. They lost their last 4 of 6 in a reversion back to their old selves, including a very winnable game on Christmas Eve against the hapless New England Patriots in Bailey Zappi. Wilson really struggled in prime time. He reverted back to his old form, turned the ball over, which unfortunately led to his benching. So the Broncos ended their season 8-9. They pretty much stumbled to start the year. They had themselves a good mid-season stretch, but I guess not all good things last forever because, they all faltered. They all fell in prey, including Russell Wilson. And what also faltered was another chance at the postseason. Still haven't made it since that Super Bowl winning season with Peyton Manning. So, considering the manner that they benched Wilson, and all the details that followed, why they did it, the Broncos at the time had a decision on their hands, as the new league year was fast approaching. And when you look at their offseason for the Broncos, they were in the red, around $19 million in the red, no money to spend, had some decisions to make to get under the cap, under the money line, and they at least had a first-round pick, though, at number 12. So compared to the last 2 years where they had no first-round pick and barely any picks at all. So this is something, at least, right? So when you look at the key free agents, not really too many things to worry about, like K'Wan Williams at corner, kicker Will Lutz. Well, actually, you do need a kicker, though. And then another one at least key free agent is center Lloyd Cushenberry. Kind of a glue to that offensive line. So maybe consider re-signing him. But the one big move that they've already made in relation to their entire 2 seasons overall, in what is already the big offseason move for the whole league overall, is, the Broncos, they've already cut ties with Russell Wilson. Yep, they already released his ass. They released Russell Wilson after making that big trade 2 years ago, after they gave up all those assets like Drew Lock, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, Noah Fant, a tight end, to the Seattle Seahawks. 2 years later, Russell Wilson in an $85 million dead cap hit, the largest ever in NFL history. Russell Wilson is gone. Finito. Gone from the Denver Broncos. Free to go wherever. Man, what an absolute disappointment for this team. Probably one now this is officially one of the worst trades in NFL history. This pretty much completes it. So, ouch. That's a big bill to swallow. That's a lot of money to swallow. Now, I don't even know if the Denver Broncos can do anything to do in free agency now. Now they have to swallow that shit. It's like $85 million plus on top of the $19 million in debt. Ouch. I mean, I don't understand the salary cap, but it's just like, still, $85 million in money in the red. Ouch. That's brutal. So anyway, if they're going to try to address their needs in the offseason despite a big amount of shit ton of money, Theo, well, you got to try and find your starting quarterback some way or another, because Now you're going to be looking for a new quarterback. But unfortunately, your options are limited because you have no money. You barely have any draft capital. You can't move up in the draft board to get a quarterback unless one magically falls to you for one reason or another. Because, well, of the shitty trades that cost them valuable draft picks. First, the Russell Wilson trade, and now Sean Payton. So now there also aren't many big names or any even bridge quarterbacks either in free agency unless Kirk Cousins decides to magically go to Denver, move his family over there. But either way, Denver's quarterback position continues to be fucked. And, well, you got to find a way to fix your interior defensive line as well. The rushing defense for Denver was the worst in the league. They allowed a lot of rushing yards against anybody. So they need to use whatever resources they have, if they have any, to acquire at least 2 defensive tackles to shore up that front. Good luck with that. And then you got to try to find some help at both corner and receiver. Because, yes, Patrick Surtain is a good corner, and Cold Lasagna is a good receiver, but they could use some help, some serious help. So drafting such for them is a must. So for the Denver Broncos, it looked like it was going to click for Sean Payton and Russell Wilson in 2023. And it did at times, but it just never got off that right foot. And it did midseason, but it fell apart in 2020 in the rest of the 2023 season. And unfortunately for them, they eventually learned that they got to eat the bad bullet that they shot at themselves. And what did it lead to? Releasing Russell Wilson and eating a $85 million bill in order to start fresh. Well, problem is, they also buried themselves deep to actually do such. And what did we learn from the Russell Wilson era in these last 2 years? I think it's summed up in 7 simple words. To put a proper end to the Russell Wilson era in this 2 years in this 2023 season, I think it's summed up officially in 7 simple words. Yes,